Welcome to Tokyosaurus. So what's up in Japan? So it's almost Halloween season, sorta, and what better way to start it off by seeing what Japan thinks is the best horror mangas out there right now. There was a recent Goo poll, a very popular Japanese polling site, that ranked the best horror mangas out of almost 2,000 participants. So if you want to get spooked or like getting spooked, this is going to be the perfect place for you to find some material. Knowing that this is Japanese horror we're talking about here, this stuff is going to be way crazier than your typical level of spooky in your average horror flick. But to begin, I'm just going to go through the top 5 of this list. If you want to find out what's on the full list, I left a link in the description below for you to check out. But for the cream of the crop, let's start at number 5, we have Tomi. Written by Junji Ito, a pretty famous horror manga artist. You've probably seen some of his works on the manga shelves of your local bookstore. Tomi is the one to read if you want to get started with his stuff. The story is about a girl named Tomi. It starts off with her funeral, but the next day she shows up to school and they begin to reveal that her classmates all share a very dark secret. Each chapter is sort of its own self-contained story, but there is one connection between all of them, and of course, that is Tomi and her murder. Tomi is a pretty spooky gal herself. Not only is she able to seduce men, she drives them to murder her only to resurrect and drive them insane again. Not gonna spoil exactly in how she does that, but the most compelling part of Tomi is how these characters find themselves in these situations with Tomi, being possessed by her beauty and finding out that she's not only a crazy chick to the point where she's dropping fools left and right, but that she can totally be a girl that you meet on the street and definitely sneak under the radar until it's already too late once you find out. Next up at number 4, we have Zekyo Gakyu, or Screaming Lessons. This one is targeted for a bit of a younger audience, so it's not as actually creepy or disturbed as say something like Tomi, the one we were looking at before. Screaming Lessons is a bunch of short stories again, but think of them along the lines of something like Goosebumps, where it's creepy but not like something you will need to keep your lights on at night for. So again, it's a collection of short stories. There's one main character / narrator, and that is Yumi, who only has her body from her stomach up, so she doesn't have legs. She's supposed to lead the reader through the darkest places and help the reader learn important lessons in life. It was really popular in Japan amongst children, as it somehow even won a children's manga award in 2013. Next up at number 3, we have Kigata ga Kita Kyofu Shimbun, or in English, Horror News, which is about a horrific newspaper called the Horror Newspaper that foretells people's extreme misfortunes. It follows a high school student that has been cursed with an evil spirit and has to fight it every day. Basically, he has to stop the events on the paper from happening, or his lifespan will shorten 100 days for every article he is unable to prevent. No one else can see this newspaper but him, so he has to do it alone. Almost no one has read this in the West, and is a pretty old manga, having been published first in the 70s, so I wouldn't suggest checking this one out unless you're really out of horror to read. But it's one of the more popular ones in Japan, having been adapted into radio shows, OVAs, movies, and games. Next up at number 2, we have Karada Sagashi, or Looking for the Body. This one is about Asuka, who is a high school student who can see the ghost of a dead classmate called Haruka, who asks Asuka to help her find her body. Asuka and her friend attempts to find the pieces of Haruka scattered around the school, but turns out there's a red person hunting them while they do so. Once the red person is able to catch and kill one student, they will then scatter the student's body into 8 pieces and gives the task to another person to find the pieces in the school. But good thing is, if Asuka fails to find all 8 pieces, the day will keep repeating itself until she and her friends are able to do so. But as a result, they will have to keep playing this sadistic game until they find all 8 pieces. This one was serialized in 2011 and was actually later made into an anime, but I would suggest checking out the manga over the anime. And lastly, at the number 1 spot for the most popular horror manga in Japan, we have Hell Teacher Nube. And this one isn't actually scary horror. This one follows a school teacher, Nube, who is also a skilled exorcist protecting his town from supernatural threats, but he's also a little supernatural himself, having a powerful demon in his left hand, whom he can actually draw strength from. It has a ton of Japanese folklore and yokai material in the anime, and with each episode having its own story with a similar formula, they were able to explore a ton of different yokai in the story. It has a lot of comedy as well as action, so the horror is more of a theme rather than it actually being real horror. This one is definitely the least scariest out of the 5, but definitely the most popular horror manga in Japan. So definitely check the anime for this one if you want to try it out. So those are the top 5 horror mangas in Japan. These are great choices if you want to get a quick scare or just want to read something horror themed. I personally would suggest Tomi out of all the ones mentioned, simply because it probably has the most unique characters and art out of all the ones mentioned. But there are definitely better horror manga out there that will scare you way more than the most popular ones. But of course, the ones listed here are probably the more entertaining ones as they are the most popular. Anyways, if there are must-read horror mangas out there not listed here, definitely let everyone know down in the comments below, as horror in anime or manga just doesn't seem to be getting as much spotlight as it did in the past. So that's it for today. Thumbs up the video if you liked it, hit the bell if you're spooked, and I'll see you guys in the next one.